Today we're going to solve equations with variables on both sides. All right, let's try one. So here we have an equation, 36 minus 4n equals negative 8 times the quantity 4n minus 1. So if you remember, the first step is to simplify the equation, and so we're going to distribute. So I'm going to take this negative 8 and multiply it by the 4n, and then take the negative 8 and multiply it by the negative 1. So I will have 36 minus 4n equals negative 32n plus 8. Well, I have to combine like terms on the right side and the left side, but all my like terms are already combined, so I can go to the next step. I have to gather my variables to one side. Well, I have this negative 32n, and I'd like to move it over with the 4n. So I'm going to add 32n to both sides. When I do that, I will have 36 plus 28n equals 8. Now my last step is simply to solve the equation. I have 36 here and an 8 over on the right side, so I'm going to subtract 36 from both sides of my equation. And I'll have 28n equals negative 28. Now I have multiplication between the 28 and the n, so I'm going to undo multiplication by doing division. So I'm going to divide both sides of the equation by 28, and I'll have n equals negative 1. Now, if I wanted to check my answer to make sure that I did all my math right, I could always plug it back into my equation. So let's try that. So I'm going to take my negative 1 and plug it into the equation everywhere I see n. And then I'm going to simplify. So 4 times negative 1 minus 1 will give me a negative 5. And negative 4 times negative 1 gives me a positive 4. And if I simplify further, I'll get 40 equals 40. This shows me that this is a true statement, so my answer is correct. Now put the video on pause and try this one yourself. All right, did you get it right? N equals 6. So your first step is to distribute. So you're going to take the negative 5 times n for a negative 5n, and the negative 5 times a positive 2 for a negative 10. And then you're going to combine your like terms, so you have two n's on the left side of the equation. So that'll give me negative 10n minus 10 equals negative 28 minus 7n. I want to gather my variables, so I'm going to take the 7n on the right side and add it to the negative 10 on the left side. And when I do that, my equation simplifies down to negative 3n minus 10 equals negative 28. And now I'm going to solve this. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides, and I'll get negative 3n equals negative 18. I now have to divide by negative 3 to solve the equation to get n alone, and I'll have n equals 6. Put the video on pause and try this one. All right, again, first we're going to distribute. Then we're going to gather our x's to one side of the equation. But when I do that, I get negative 21 equals 30. So what does that mean? Well, that's a false statement. So that means there is no solution, or my solution set is the null set. All right, try this one now. All right, so on this one, there's no distributing, so I'm going to combine my like terms. I'll have 8x minus 8 equals 8x minus 8. Well, you can kind of see where this one's going without even combining your variables onto one side, but let's do that. So I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides, and when I do that, I get negative 8 equals negative 8. So now this is a true statement. So my answer is all real numbers. Any value of x will make this a true statement. Let's try a word problem. So if you know from geometry that the perimeter of a rectangle can be measured as twice the length plus twice the width, and write an equation that represents the perimeter of a rectangle with respect to length and width. So here's my rectangle. Of course, I need to define my variables because they're not given in the word problem. So I'm going to say L equals length and W equals width. So this means my length is L, but of course I have two of them, so L would be up there as well. And I have W for my width. And so my perimeter would be 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. Well, if the perimeter of the rectangle measures 45 meters and the length measures 10 meters, determine the width of the rectangle. Well, I already have my equation because we just found that out. And the problem told me the perimeter is 45 meters, the length is 10 meters, but I don't know what the width is, so that's what I will solve for. So let's plug the two variables we do know into the equation and then solve the equation. Well, 2 times 10 is 20. I can subtract 20 from both sides of the equation, and I'll get 25 equals 2W. And I can now divide by 2 to solve the equation, and I get W is 12.5. But remember, this is a word problem, so you want to make sure you answer the question. The width of the rectangle is 12.5 meters. All right, let me know if you have any questions.